All right, thank you for coming today. I'm really excited to share what I do as well as my personal story. So I'm gonna let you in with the introduction about myself in regards to where I'm employed at the moment. We have a booth set up downstairs actually for Friends and Advocates PL. What we do is we provide social rehabilitations to people who might be isolated due to a mental health concern. So my job there is to provide one-on-one support, group support, psychosocial workshops, and then I just support people in their recovery. Now, my story is complex, and how did I end up here? So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Well, I immigrated from Peru back in 1989. I grew up in a place where I had a big, large family. My mother had 12 brothers and sisters, so needless to say, I always had some functions to go to, showers, births, birthdays, you name it. Unfortunately, through those periods of fun in my youth, I endured a lot of physical and sexual abuse from ages 3 to 11. And it was a very hard way to grow up, being from a Catholic upbringing where things like that were blasphemy to talk about. So in a sense, I grew up with a distorted notion of the self. I wasn't aware of who I was or what my identity was. And so I didn't disclose this information until I was about 11 years old. Now, by the time 11 years old came up, 1989, I came to Canada. And I thought this was going to be a wonderful opportunity. Needless to say, it was a shocking opportunity. I came from a country that was very warm, that was very vibrant, a lot of community, a lot of unity, to a country that was extremely freezing. I had no idea what I was eating. I didn't have any friends, and I didn't speak the language. So it was really hard to grow up as a child in Canada. And apart from that, during my period in elementary school, I endured a lot of bullying based on my ethnic background, based on my accent. So this was the time where my parents decided to seek help and involve the school social workers, school psychologists who used to come specially for me. But I found within the medical system, you get bounced a lot from place to place. There's a lot of waiting periods. There's not enough information to educate parents about it. It's more, I was pushed towards more the medical side where medication was often offered without the education to recovery for management. So I wasn't able to thrive as well as I wanted to. So in my navigation through the mental health system, I endured a few suicide attempts in my youth. I ended up jumping from hospital to hospital, and one of the courses that I was taking in the hospital was art. And I think this opportunity opened up my eyes for me to practice mindfulness that I hadn't experienced in all my years. And it was an opportunity for me to get the expression out that I wasn't able to communicate as a kid. I remember drawing with friends, connecting with people that were able to understand where I was coming from. It was people my age. It was the beginning of hope for me. And I remember talking to a psychiatrist one day. I had a session with him after I had finished some of my paintings, and he happened to look at one, and he said, "Why is your art so dark? What are you trying to prove to other people?" And immediately, instead of finding support, I shut down. I thought that maybe, did he think I was seeking attention? Did he not understand me? He's the professional, he's supposed to support me. Well, it didn't work out that way. So, as an adult, coming out of high school, I struggled a lot with identity. And I think it's because people that experience trauma at one point or another, or negative experiences, they grow up with the inability to connect to the self, right? We are bombarded by a lot of pressures in our community, by society, by expectations from cultures, religion, parents. And so we're not able to figure out our identity because the pressure itself gives us too many options. And when it comes to living, recovery, and management, there's nothing that is right in your face that tells you this is the best way to go about it. So I'll let you a little bit in on how that happened for me and how that turned out to be art for myself. So, in 2013, I had left a very abusive environment. It was 7 years, but the good thing about that was I had 2 beautiful children. And when I left the environment that I was in, I was put into a shelter. I was helped by a lot of community service workers, my family physician, and I even found a program called Cognitive Behavior Therapy that was offered in Peel. I was able to educate on emotional regulation, on thought patterns, and then I thought, if this is helping me move forward and I'm getting all the support from my community, this is what I want to be involved in. I didn't want to stay home. I didn't want to be depressed anymore. I began to kind of tap within myself what worked for me. So I think the first step for my well-being was education, right? Once I knew what I was doing, I began to eat healthier, I began to exercise, and I began to look good for myself. When that happened, I realized that the physical part and the education part was great. However, there was something missing. I couldn't put my finger right on it as to what that was. And then I started to look into different ways to practice spiritual health. So we got physical health, right? We got emotional health, mental health, and we have spiritual health. So once I started to take part into meditation, I started learning about Reiki. I started to pray in my own way and tapped into my own self. I realized that the artistic part of me surfaced again. So that part of me that was lost in that hospital that day with that comment from that psychiatrist was again surfaced through my spiritual practice. And then I began to draw, I began to paint. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how art can help you thrive, right? So, for example, how does artistic expression help us with our mental health? It's about letting ourselves and others focus on our inner experiences. There has been many times that I have drawn something. I couldn't exactly tell where that was coming from. And now I'm a participant of psychotherapy once a week. And I started taking my work to my therapist. And once I realized that we were breaking things down and exploring some of the things that were coming from my subconscious, there was a lot of depth. There was a lot of healing. It's a way to practice mindfulness. Sometimes I can be drawing in a room and 3-5 hours go by and I don't even notice that the time has passed. But there is such a sense of accomplishment when I look at the piece and I realize that it translates something that I wasn't even aware that I was feeling. So it is about our inner experience. Art can also be used to help people explore their emotions, develop self-awareness, cope with stress, boost self-esteem, and work on social skills. This can be done by creating art or viewing art. So I'll give you an example. I walked through this room today and noticed those paintings over there. So if you turn that way, it looks like fungus, right? So I took that break. So from being here today, I took that break to stand and look at that. And that was a mindful piece, right? That wasn't somebody, I don't know if it's a painting or if it's a picture, but just the mindful practice of looking, viewing, and experiencing is what art is about. It's also an expressive medium. Art can be used to help communicate, overcome stress, and explore different aspects of our own personalities. So there's a lot of mediums. I mean, we can use acrylic, oil painting, watercolor, mixed media, you name it. So it's about personal experience, it's about personal choice, and exploring what it is out there that might work for you. It can be an opportunity to gain personal insight and develop coping skills. How many here would you say that you use art in order to practice mindfulness when you're struggling mentally, right? That's right, and that can be in the form of painting, singing, dancing, whatever it is that gets your expression out. Techniques used in art therapy can include drawing, painting, coloring, sculpting, collages. Using mindfulness as we create, we can analyze what we have made and how it makes us feel. We can inquire other perspectives and see how our work makes others feel. Through exploring our art, we can look for themes and conflicts that may be affecting our thoughts, emotions, and behavior. So I'm going to do a little exercise right now. When it comes to perspectives, a piece of art can be completely different to somebody than somebody else, right? We have a way of translating. So I'm going to show you a couple of pieces, and I would like to be, for whoever wants to participate, to let me know what you got from this particular piece. And when we're done on those comments, I'm going to tell you what was behind the piece from my point of view. Okay, so we're going to start. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the front and I'm going to show you this, guys, okay? Okay, so this particular piece is called Over the Wall. Okay, so now that you have seen it, in your mind, what stands out and what emotions can you feel from this piece? What is your perspective on this piece? And you can raise your hand. Yeah?
It looks like maybe the shades behind the lady
Mm-hmm.
can represent different moods and so forth, and regardless of what mood you're in, that individual is consistently present.
Sorry? The individual is?
Consistently present.
Yeah, yeah.
And the wall maybe is like walls that we create, they have a way of popping over regardless of how thick the wall is.
Yeah? Thank you, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah?
When I saw it, I almost felt like, I guess as like put myself like as a person, it's like taking one last look at whatever it is before I kind of pop over to that side where you said right here,
Mm-hmm.
some of these brighter colors, like the blue and the orange and the red.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Great. Any other comments? I saw you had a comment back there. Anyone? Yes, go ahead.
Personally, what stuck out to me was the contrast between like the colors, because like behind her is like nice shades of different colors and stuff, and she's just like I don't know, just like dark and just like shades of gray. So
Mm-hmm.
I think personally it kind of represents to me like she's not really seeing like the what's beautiful in her life, and just
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I really like the theme of overcoming and stepping to the other side, right? And this is pretty much the root of this painting. And I'll explain to you exactly why I painted this. So, I drew this painting because I had endured a 2-year relationship that was very negative and toxic, and I felt completely drained. Hence why she looks emancipated like this. Now, the reason why I did the wall, because I was having one last look at that experience, and I was going over the sunset, right? And this is why the color's in the background. So emotionally, from my experience, this painting is definitely about overcoming and going over the wall into sunny, better days, right? So I really love it how everybody got that. Okay. This one is a tricky one, and I'm really excited to hear what your point of view is because there's a secret to it, okay? So I'm gonna just go around again. You might recognize the person. Now, this painting doesn't have a name. I couldn't come up with a name for this one. Okay, so would anybody like to comment on first things that came out to you for this painting? Yeah?
It was interesting that it seemed like growth is coming out of stone or cement, something that doesn't normally sustain life, as like a tree and a person coming out of it.
Yeah? Yeah, growth, I like that. And from cement, which is really, you know, when you see the little plants growing between the cracks on the sidewalk, kind of like that. It reminds me of that. Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah?
It looks hopeful. Was there like graffiti art on the corner?
Yes, there was.
So you're maybe going past your past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Any other comments? Okay. So the funny thing about this painting is I took part in an ayahuasca retreat. I'm not sure, does anybody know what, you guys are familiar with that? It's a DMT psychedelic kind of therapy to help you kind of bring about what you may be having in your subconscious that you're not aware of, so you can face those moments and start healing and start managing your own mental health. So the reason, that's the reason behind this painting. So as you can see, I am from Peru. I came from Peru in '89. So these are pretty much what the Machu Picchu walls, if you guys know where Machu Picchu is. And the pattern on the side is basically a pattern from the Shipibo tradition, which is where ayahuasca tradition came from. And the colors is the fact that I saw psychedelic colors during the experience. And there's also vines that signify where ayahuasca came from. And the reason that I'm looking up is because this opportunity gave me the chance to stop looking down on myself, to start growth, and to look up, right? So this is like the significance of this particular painting, right? And I'm gonna do, let's see, one last one. I'm gonna do one last one, and then you guys, we can engage in that conversation. All right, and what can you tell me that you got from that one?
Yeah, battling with the demon.
Battling with a demon. I like that. I like that. Anyone else? Yeah?
It looked like it was maybe at a cemetery, so almost like things that have been buried coming back and being put away.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah? Sorry.
I think it's like a girl just like instead of letting like negative voices bring her down, and just like Alex coming back at them, then rather than letting them like creating her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes?
Her focus was on somewhere else. She wasn't paying much attention to the demons.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this particular one, what did you get from it? Like, just wondering if it's a nightmare? Yeah. Yeah. So basically, the reason why I'm showing you just a quick picture like that is because sometimes we have these preconceived notions, not just about people, but about things that we view in general. So sometimes what you may come up with in your mind may not necessarily be what's happening or behind that expression, right? So there is a number here. It's an unknown grave that says 495, and it stands for the letter DIE, which is die, right? Now, the reason that I did that is because, as you can see, there seems to be like zombies coming out of the ground, trying to attack this person, and this person has a certain power that comes as yellow light from her hands. So that's basically her as taking on her power and pretty much pushing those two zombies back to where they belong. So this is a representation of the darker aspects that we may experience in our lives, how sometimes they surface, but we have to have the light within us to put them back down. Now, the light for some of us can become as a spiritual practice, or it can become artistic expression, or whatever it defines, whatever you define that works for you, right? And so this is why I showed you like in short pieces. So I really appreciate all the comments about the pieces. And so because this type of therapy worked tremendously for me, at the beginning of my therapy with my present psychotherapist that I have right now, we had talked into the types of diagnoses that I have received throughout the years. Part of it was depression, anxiety, definitely. But I was also misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder. And what happens when people go through stressful times and they get diagnosed, they're misdiagnosed, and they tend to own what that diagnosis is, and it can be extremely unhealthy to own something that is not really yours. So at the end of the day, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, which explains the depression and the anxiety, but I really had to find ways on how to deal with this. Now, there isn't a lot of art therapy resources in the community that don't cost money, and that's really rough. But through my research, I had found a lot of peer-led organizations that are focused on artistic expression. So I wanted to be able to have the opportunity to share those resources with you guys today and talk a little bit about them, as well as something that I have created. So I'll start with some of the things that I worked on. So besides my job, like I said, I do psychosocial education to the members of the organization, and I saw the value of education, and I saw what it did to members and how they live better lives and how they communicate much better. They're not as socially awkward as when they decided to join. And I thought, by the time I go home, I feel like I'm not doing enough sometimes. So I took it upon myself to do this as a hobby, right? So right now, I've created my own kind of side business, but I don't charge anything for it because I've been in a situation where I was helpless, where I needed the help and I didn't have the funds to access them. So I run this based on charity. I run this, whatever you want to donate, whenever you come to one of my workshops, that's what you donate. So my side business is called Dark Art and Stories. And why dark art? Because that's the style of how I paint. I'm not ashamed of it. I was, told at one point, like I said to you guys before, that what was I trying to prove? But I don't feel any shame behind it. It's the way that I express myself. I'm a person with a little darker aspects of myself, and that's quite fine. I own them. And so I tell people to not be afraid of the darker aspects of yourselves. And so through Dark Art and Stories, not only do I do public speaking, but I also facilitate art workshops in the community where people are able to support each other through like a peer lens. So are you guys aware what peer support is? Yeah? So it's people with lived experience helping each other out. A lot of people do it as a job. A lot of people are engaged in the community as volunteers. And I believe it's such a great way to go because when you go through your psychologist, psychiatrist, or medical practitioner, I find almost in a sense like you're in this big dark hole and they're there kind of giving you a hand to take you out. Whereas peer support, I find that a peer would get into that hole with you and sit there and listen to you before both of you are out. That's the way that I kind of translate peer support. So I've brought like a few handouts if you guys are interested in taking part of the art workshops that I facilitate in the community. You guys can pass them around amongst each other. There's also a website that I have where I share a lot of videos on self-management, mental health management, personal improvement, and sometimes things that I'm going through myself that I'm having a hard time managing. And so I reach out to the community online to see if I can relate to anybody. And there's so many conversations that have risen from that. So it's an opportunity to not only to have that conversation in person, but online. So I have that, and I brought 3 other ones. Seeing as I'm in Toronto, I brought resources for 2 organizations that are dedicated to art expression that are free. Have you guys heard of Wellbeing? No? Here in Toronto? So Wellbeing is a Toronto-based company focusing on mental health and creativity. It says, our mission is to give people the opportunity to see themselves as creative human beings to better understand their mental well-being. We host workshops, speak at events, and support our community by sharing knowledge and resources. So this is something that I'll be passing along to. They have a website and they have the Instagram account. And they have their monthly calendars that you can take part in. So if you're a person that has that artistic flair to you and want to participate and not have to spend top bucks for it, this is a place to go. And they also have workshops. I don't know if you're familiar with the cost of art therapy, but it's quite expensive. So to find means to do this that is free and you can share in a peer-based setting, it creates the space of acceptance, and therefore you're able to create freely, much more different than if you were to pay through a session, I believe. Okay, so as I said before, the way to express yourselves not only through drawing, through painting, dancing, writing is a big one, right? How many people here like journaling or writing poems, right? So have you guys heard of the Toronto Writers Collective? Yeah? Awesome, awesome. So I'll read a little bit about them. I'm actually a trained facilitator for the Toronto Writers Collective, so in my job right now, what I do is facilitate these workshops at different service areas, and it has been so amazing to see people come out of their shell, people who actually were not really talkative at all, and all of a sudden they're writing like they're amazing poets. It blows my mind to see that. So the Toronto Writers Collective is a nonprofit organization that provides free ongoing creative writing workshops in Toronto's underserved communities. Our mission is to inspire voice and empower the unheard in our city. The populations we serve are diverse and include the homeless, the LGBTQ+ community, women at risk, and Aboriginal communities with mental issues running through all sectors. Our workshops offer a safe, accessible, and inclusive space for participants to write and share their stories. So if that seems like something for you or something that you can pass along to somebody that may need this resource, I'm going to be passing these around too. Do you guys have any questions between the resources that I just said? No? Okay. And the last one. Okay. The last one is from a dear friend of mine called Jessica. She runs a business called Tree of Stars on Tour, where she participates in workshops in the community for free again. She's a peer support worker, and she does art, she does singing, and she does writing. So this is mostly offered in the areas of Hamilton, but because she's mobile and she drives around the community, she's able to go anywhere and offer her services. Besides this, she also offers peer support services. You can book it through Facebook, through the Tree of Stars link that I will be handing out here for anybody that's interested. Okay. So the reason why I brought these resources, besides talking about what art therapy is about, aside from sharing my work, is because I think it's essential that as a community, we don't forget the creative piece that serves as enlightenment to the South. Sometimes we can get lost in the hustle and bustle of our lives, whether that be family, culture, work, that we forget that we are artists from the time that we're born. We have the ability to learn and express our creation. So, do you guys have any questions about anything that I just said? About art? Yeah?
Are there programs to train more peer art-based facilitators? So if there are, if I come across clients or patients who are interested in art and want to get into what you're doing,
Yeah.
training for?
Yeah, so the Toronto Writers Collective, for example, is an organization that provides this training for free. So if you feel like your community may need something like this, you can take the training for free here in Toronto, and it's a 3-day session, and it's pretty much the whole day, and they'll teach you how to facilitate their workshops in the community. So that's the writing piece. Now, the artistic piece, I'm not sure if there's anything that is offered for free, but what I'm seeing more is a lot of peer-led workshops, just people that take it upon themselves to do this, or kind of create this as part of their plan for their organization. So aside from this, for example, I created like art workshops at the place where I work now. So I facilitate art workshops for a 4-week basis, like once a week. And I didn't have to be educated in art therapy. It's just from my own peer experience. There's so much valid things that we can get from the peer experience, right? Yeah. Yeah. So any more questions? Yeah.
But I heard there's also like an exhibit for artists who are experiencing mental illness, and they put all their work there. It's like once a year. I don't know if it's called something by fire.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
I haven't.
by fire, but yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's still on, but
Yeah. Okay. Like a lot of events that I find them mostly through social media. On Instagram, for example, if you are a fan of any artist, if you start following those artists, that'll essentially you'll get connected to events that are happening in the community. I just recently did like Toronto Art Crawl. I was selling some of my paintings there, and I connected with so many artists that were struggling with mental health that one day art inspired them and they decided to create a business out of this. I became a friend with somebody that has MS, and through her struggles with MS and her coping mechanisms of painting all the time, now she runs a successful business. This has inspired her to live her life fully. So this is what art can do. This is what mindfulness can do, right? Yeah. Any more questions? No? Yeah.
I work in a downtown through Margaret's, which is a drop-in for homeless people. And I created, over the last 10 years, a resource that is free downtown area art drop-ins. It always has snacks and they're always fun. I can share that.
Yeah, definitely. Did you bring some of your brochures or anything like that? Okay. Yeah. So there's another connection. Even if you leave it here when I give out the resources, you're very welcome to snap a picture. But I think that building that sense of community and connection is what makes us feel like there's hope, like we can cope. Doesn't matter what the background is, whether it's like trauma-based background or just stress background. I mean, there is an aspect of mindfulness that brings about that hope within every single human being that I've known that has, had been connected to the expression piece of being artistic. Yeah. Do you have any more questions? Yeah?
I'm just curious on your artistic practice. When you do the true artwork, there's only one you title it. What is the implication? Doesn't matter whether you title or just limit on title.
Well, I usually come up with titles when I know the root of where it comes from. So the only one that I haven't really titled has been that ayahuasca painting because I didn't know what to call it. But the title is basically the common denominator of the painting itself. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Any more questions? No? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the resources here for anybody to grab. There's a lot of them. So like I said, if you feel like you need them, that's great. If you feel like you can pass them around to other people and connect them with these resources, that would be great. And I just want to thank you for participating today, for being here and listening to my story. And I hope that to see you, some of you in my future workshops. What I do is I post them on Facebook and Instagram and on my website as well. If you're looking to look at some of the videos that I post as well on mental health management, please do so. If you want to leave any comments or if you have any questions that you want to explore, please do so. Okay? Great, thank you.